Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Six Path Weeb, and today we continue one of the most emotional and interesting alternate stories in the Naruto universe. Today's topic is, what if Kakashi became Naruko's father figure? Part 3. In the previous parts, we saw how Naruko's life began to change when Kakashi stepped into a role no one expected him to take. Instead of growing up alone, she had someone watching over her, guiding her, and slowly becoming the family she never had. But that bond is about to be tested. As Naruko grows stronger and the world around her becomes more dangerous, Kakashi will face decisions that could change both of their futures. Before we begin, here's a quick disclaimer. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits go to their respective creators and copyright holders. Now, without wasting any more time, let's continue the story. Let's start, guys. The next day. The next morning, Naruko woke up at 7 a.m., rather than the 5 a.m. her teacher Kakashi had suggested. She hopped out of bed and stretched, making sure her body felt fine after the intense training session she had gone through the night before. With a small sigh, Naruko created a shadow clone to prepare breakfast while she went to take a shower. After rinsing off, she turned off the water and stepped out, grabbing a towel to dry herself. As she passed the mirror, she paused. Her reflection caught her attention. Naruko tilted her head slightly, studying herself. Do I look a little stronger than last week? She wondered aloud. She looked at her arms and shoulders thoughtfully. Naruko had always exercised quite a bit, even before she began focusing seriously on training, so she wasn't sure if it made sense to notice such changes already. Recently, however, she had started eating healthier meals, and that might have helped her feel more energetic and strong. Shrugging, Naruko decided she was probably just imagining things. After drying off, she went to her room and got dressed. By the time she finished tying her headband, her clone had prepared breakfast. Naruko walked into the kitchen and sat down as the clone placed the food in front of her, muttering jokingly about lazy originals before disappearing in a small puff. Naruko grinned and began eating. Scrambled eggs, toast, a bit of bacon, and a glass of orange juice. It was one of the few breakfasts she could cook well so far, but she was proud of it. As she ate, she thought about the upcoming test. Anko didn't tell me anything about Kakashi's test, she thought. But she did say he's clever and might try to trick us somehow. Naruko nodded to herself. That means I'll just have to be ready for anything. After finishing breakfast, she placed her plate in the sink and glanced at the clock. 7:30 a.m. Better head over now, she said. Naruko stepped outside, locked her door, and leapt lightly onto the rooftops, making her way toward the training grounds. She arrived at training ground 7 to see her two teammates already there. Sasuke leaned against a tree, looking serious and quiet. Sakura sat nearby, glancing at him now and then as if she wanted to talk but wasn't sure how. Morning, you two. Naruko called cheerfully. Both teammates turned. Naruko. Why are you so late? Sakura shouted, standing up and pointing at her. Naruko blinked and tilted her head. I'm not late. Sakura's eye twitched. Not late? You. Sakura, Naruko said calmly, raising a hand. Do you see our teacher anywhere? Sakura paused, confused. No. Naruko spread her hands. Exactly. If Kakashi-sensei isn't here yet, then technically I'm not late. Sakura frowned, trying to argue, but couldn't find the right words. Naruko smiled politely and walked over to a nearby tree. Sitting down against the trunk, she pulled a book from her bag. It was a book about sealing techniques. Opening it, she began reading happily. Sealing arts fascinated Naruko. According to the book, there were 3 levels of mastery. The first level was novice, which Naruko currently considered herself to be. At this stage, the most important skill was writing kanji symbols neatly and precisely. Even a tiny mistake could ruin the entire seal. Naruko had already learned that lesson during practice. The second level was journeyman. At that level, seal users traveled far and wide to learn new symbols and techniques, studying many different kinds of seals and even modifying them. The third level was seal master. Very few people in history had reached that level. Masters were able to create entirely new seals and incredibly complex formulas. Naruko's eyes sparkled as she read. Unlike other ninja techniques that followed strict patterns, sealing seemed almost limitless. With enough creativity and understanding, amazing things could be created. The thought filled Naruko with excitement. For a few minutes, the training ground remained quiet. Eventually, Sasuke glanced over and noticed her reading. "What are you reading, Naruko?" he asked. Sakura looked over too. Naruko looked up from her book. "It's about sealing techniques," she said simply. Sasuke waited, expecting more explanation. When Naruko returned to reading, he frowned slightly. "And?" Naruko looked up again. "It's a beginner's book on seals," she said. "Level 2 practice." Sasuke scoffed a little. "Like you could understand something that complicated." Sakura nodded quickly. "Yeah. Only Sasuke understands difficult things like that. Stop trying to show off." Naruko felt a flicker of irritation, but she took a slow breath and calmed herself. Then she smirked. "No need to be jealous," she said lightly. "You can go back to standing there and thinking mysterious thoughts." Sasuke frowned but didn't respond, returning to his quiet stance. "Hey! Don't talk to Sasuke like that," Sakura protested. Naruko sighed softly and returned to her book. "I guess I'll just show them through my actions," she thought. "That's always been easier for me anyway." Dash. A few minutes later, a small poof of smoke appeared near the training posts. Kakashi suddenly stood there. "Good morning, everyone." "You're late," Sakura shouted. All three others winced at the volume. "Sorry," Kakashi said calmly. "I got lost on the road of life." Before Sakura could reply, Naruko grinned. "I know that road," she said. "It twists and turns like a roller coaster." Kakashi's visible eye curved into a smile. "I'm glad someone understands." Sakura and Sasuke both looked mildly annoyed. Ignoring that, Kakashi walked over to the center post and placed a small clock on it. Then he pulled 2 small bells from his pouch and attached them to his belt. "Now then," he said, "your test is simple." He jingled the bells. "You must take these bells from me. Anyone who doesn't get a bell will be sent back to the academy for extra training." Sasuke narrowed his eyes with determination. Sakura looked nervous. Naruko frowned thoughtfully. Something about the situation felt strange. "But sensei," Sakura said, "there are only 2 bells." Kakashi shrugged. "That means at least one of you will fail." He also held up 2 lunch boxes. "And whoever doesn't get a bell will sit tied to a post while the others eat lunch." Sakura and Sasuke's stomachs rumbled slightly. Naruko, however, simply smiled. Kakashi glanced at her. "Naruko. I suggested that you not eat breakfast." Naruko shrugged. "You suggested it," she said. "You didn't order it." She folded her arms proudly. "And if I didn't eat, I wouldn't have the energy to do my best." Kakashi studied her quietly for a moment. She's very different from what the academy reports described, he thought. Finally, he nodded. "Fair enough." Then he stepped back and gestured to the training field. "You may use practice tools if you wish. Come at me seriously." Sakura gasped. "But sensei, what if you get hurt?" Kakashi gave a calm smile. "Don't worry." He held up the bells again. "If you want one of these, you'll have to try your very best." Naruko stood up, brushing dirt from her clothes. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with excitement. A challenge had begun. And Naruko was ready. Naruko snorted softly as she imagined any of them actually managing to hurt a jonin. Nearby, Kakashi chuckled in his relaxed way. "Trust me," he said calmly, "I think I'm good enough to avoid getting hurt." He looked at the 3 young ninja in training standing before him. "Now then, get ready, set, go." The 3 genin dashed away at once, disappearing into the grove of tall trees that surrounded the clearing. Well, at least they know how to hide, Kakashi thought. A moment later, however, a shadow appeared over him. "You know," Kakashi said casually, looking up, "compared to the others, you're a little unusual." Naruko stood there with her arms crossed, golden hair bright in the sunlight. She narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. "Something strange about this test." Kakashi raised an eyebrow, hiding his surprise behind curiosity. "Oh? I've never heard of a 3-person squad before," Naruko said. "A squad always has 3 genin and a jonin sensei. That makes 4. Could she have figured it out already?" Kakashi wondered. Then he shook the thought away. "No, she just knows something feels suspicious." "Well," Kakashi replied lightly, "aren't you full of surprises? But noticing that won't help you get a bell." "I guess you're right," Naruko said with a shrug. Then she tilted her head. So, can I have a bell? Kakashi blinked. No, you can't, he said, amused. But good try. No one has asked me that before. Well, Naruko replied cheerfully, it was worth asking. Then she rushed forward. Kakashi calmly reached into his pouch. Naruko slowed, wondering what he would pull out. A weapon? Instead, Kakashi pulled out a small book and opened it. Naruko blinked. Is that Icha? She asked curiously. Kakashi glanced up from the pages with a smiling eye. Why yes, it is. Have you heard of it? Not really, Naruko admitted. But my uncle likes it. And a friend once read me a few parts. She blushed slightly at the memory. Your friend must have interesting taste, Kakashi said calmly as he turned another page. Now then, why don't you try attacking? Don't worry. I doubt your attacks will disturb my reading. Naruko shook her head but dashed forward anyway. She pulled several kunai from her pouch and tossed them into the air. Kunai shadow clone technique. She called. The 4 kunai multiplied into many shining copies that flew toward Kakashi from different directions. Without even lifting his gaze from the book, Kakashi avoided some and neatly caught others with one hand. Naruko closed the distance and tried a quick punch. Kakashi blocked it easily. She followed with an elbow, then a spinning kick, moving as fast as she could. Kakashi calmly stepped aside from each attempt. Naruko stumbled slightly but regained her balance quickly. She focused her chakra into her legs, moving faster. This time Kakashi looked up. She's quicker than I expected, he thought. Naruko continued her flurry of movements, trying different angles. She considered removing the training weights on her legs but decided to save that for later. Eventually Kakashi jumped backward and tucked his book away. Well, he said thoughtfully, this is unexpected. It seems I won't be able to read after all. Naruko grinned. So I'm better than you thought, huh? Maybe a little, Kakashi admitted. But don't get the wrong idea. You still have a lot to learn. Naruko felt a tiny spark of irritation but took a deep breath. Don't lose control, she reminded herself. If I get emotional, I'll make mistakes. Then she smiled as an idea appeared. You won't be saying that when my punch reaches you, she declared, charging forward. Kakashi easily blocked her first punch and gently caught her wrist. You know, he said lazily, losing your temper is often the first step toward losing. Naruko smirked. Maybe, she said. But getting too close to me was your mistake. With a poof, the Naruko he held vanished in a cloud of smoke. Kakashi stepped back quickly, surprised. An explosive clone? He thought. Another Naruko leapt from a tree branch above him. Kakashi avoided the kick she sent toward him, only to notice a second Naruko appear beside her. They moved together in clever coordination. Kakashi blocked, dodged, and stepped away from each attempt with smooth movements. Soon he landed lightly on the ground again. Naruko's clone rushed forward and almost touched the bells at his waist. The tiny bells jingled. Kakashi quickly moved aside, and the clone disappeared in another puff of smoke. Moments later, Kakashi found himself alone in the clearing. He glanced around thoughtfully. She's better than I expected, he murmured. Then he disappeared in a swirl of leaves, heading off to check on the other 2 students. High in a nearby tree, Sasuke had watched the entire exchange. He frowned deeply. Naruko had done far better than he expected. She had used several clever techniques and moved with surprising skill. How did she learn all that? He muttered quietly. Suddenly a soft voice whispered nearby. PSSD. Sasuke. He stiffened and turned around. Naruko crouched on the branch behind him, smiling. Sasuke blinked in surprise. How did she get there without me noticing? What do you want? He asked stiffly. Naruko ignored the tone. Don't you think something about this test is strange? She asked. Sasuke frowned. What do you mean? 3 Jonin trying to take bells from a Jonin, Naruko explained. A Jonin is extremely skilled. None of us could beat someone like that alone. She looked at him seriously. I think we should work together. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly. Work together? He repeated. Naruko nodded. If we cooperate, we might have a chance to get the bells. Sasuke folded his arms. I don't need help, he said firmly. I can do it myself. Naruko sighed. Listen. That's Kakashi. He's famous for being very talented. None of us can outmatch him alone. But if we combine our ideas, we might succeed. For a moment Sasuke hesitated. Then he shook his head. I'll handle it myself. He jumped down from the branch and disappeared among the trees. Naruko watched him leave and rubbed the back of her head. Why is he so determined to do everything alone? She muttered. Still, she stood up and stretched. Well, she said to herself with a determined smile, there's still one more teammate to talk to. With that, Naruko hopped lightly from branch to branch, heading off to find Sakura and see if she would be willing to work together. Sakura stared in amazement as the training exercise between Naruko and Kakashi came to an end. She blinked several times, hardly believing what she had just seen. Naruko, who always seemed playful, loud, and a little clumsy, had just moved through the forest with surprising skill. She had used clever tricks and creative jutsu that Sakura had never even heard about before. Could Naruko really be that talented? Of course not. Shanaro. Inner Sakura shouted inside her mind. There's no way Naruko Baka is that good. It must be some kind of trick to make you think she's amazing. Sakura folded her arms and nodded to herself. Yeah, that must be it, she whispered. My heart only notices Sasuke-kun anyway. With that decided, Sakura stood up and carefully walked deeper into the forest training ground. Maybe if she helped Sasuke get one of Kakashi-sensei's bells, he would finally notice how helpful she could be. As Sakura walked, her imagination began running ahead of her. Maybe Sasuke-kun will say, thank you. And then we'll become great teammates. And then someday we'll be famous ninja together. She smiled happily at the thought. Suddenly. Snap. A small twig cracked nearby. Sakura froze and slowly turned her head. A short distance away stood Kakashi-sensei, leaning casually against a tree while reading his book. I don't think he saw me, Sakura whispered to herself. Just as she was about to sneak away, a quiet voice spoke behind her. PSST, Sakura. She spun around. Kakashi-sensei stood there again. Before Sakura could say anything, the Kakashi in front of her turned into a swirl of flower petals. Sakura blinked. Huh? The world around her suddenly shimmered like a dream, and everything went dark for a moment. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself sitting in the grass. Where am I? Sakura asked, looking around in confusion. The forest looked almost the same. But not quite. Then she heard a familiar voice. Sakura. Sakura turned quickly. Sasuke-kun? A few steps away stood Sasuke. He looked tired and dusty from training, leaning against a tree with his arms crossed. Sakura, he said calmly. You should probably take a deep breath. Sakura blinked again. A deep breath? Before she could think about it, she suddenly realized something. The forest felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. Then Kakashi-sensei's voice spoke gently from somewhere nearby. Genjutsu practice, he explained. Illusions are meant to test how calmly you can think. Sakura's cheeks turned pink. Oh. The illusion faded like mist in the morning sun, and the forest returned to normal. A moment later, Sasuke, who had been training elsewhere, heard Sakura's surprised shout echo through the trees. He looked up from where he stood. That sounded like Sakura, he muttered. Nearby, Kakashi stood on a tree branch with his usual relaxed posture. Training can be surprising sometimes, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Meanwhile, not far away, Naruko sat on a tree branch, listening carefully. When she heard Sakura's voice, she perked up. That sounded like Sakura, Naruko said. She hopped down from the branch and hurried toward the clearing. A moment later she arrived and found Sakura sitting on the grass, looking dizzy but awake. Sakura, Naruko said, kneeling beside her. Are you okay? Sakura rubbed her forehead. I think so. Kakashi-sensei used a genjutsu on me. Naruko chuckled kindly. Yeah, he likes doing that during training. Sakura stood up quickly. Sasuke-kun. She suddenly exclaimed, remembering she had been looking for him. Before Naruko could respond, Sakura dashed off through the trees again. Naruko scratched the back of her head. Wow. She runs fast when she's motivated. She sighed, then smiled. Well, I guess I'll have to keep working on my plan myself. Naruko looked toward the clearing where Kakashi often returned to read his book. If I understand Kakashi-sensei right, she said thoughtfully, I might be able to surprise him. Not long after, Kakashi walked calmly into the clearing again, turning a page of his book. But he paused. Someone was already there. Standing near the training posts was a woman with long dark hair and bright red eyes. She wore a shinobi outfit and a Konoha headband. "Kakashi," she said with a polite smile. Kakashi tilted his head. "Kurenai? I thought you were training your team today." "I will be soon," she replied. "But first, I wanted to ask your advice about something." Kakashi studied her quietly for a moment. Then his visible eye curved into a knowing smile. Naruko's transformation jutsu was very impressive, but Kakashi had spent many years as a ninja. He decided to play along. "Well," he said casually, closing his book for a moment, "what kind of advice do you need?" Kurenai folded her arms thoughtfully. "I want to create a training challenge for my students," she said. "Something that's difficult enough to help them grow. But still fair." Kakashi nodded slowly. "A balance between challenge and teamwork," he said. "Exactly," she replied. Behind the transformation, Naruko grinned to herself. Her plan was working. And maybe, just maybe, she would finally get one of Kakashi-sensei's bells. The training day was far from over, and for Naruko, every moment was another chance to learn something new and become a better ninja. And that made her smile. "And you want me to help?" Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "You do know that I'm not the best person to ask something like this." Kakashi smirked beneath his mask. "Of course you would know this if you were really Kurenai, Naruto." Kakashi reached forward to cancel the transformation, but he suddenly paused. Something felt unusual about the situation. Kurenai crossed her arms and looked at him with an unimpressed expression. "Kakashi," she said firmly. Kakashi immediately pulled his hand back, realizing he had made a mistake. His single visible eye widened in embarrassment. "Oh. Sorry," he said quickly. Kurenai shook her head with a sigh. "You really need to pay more attention." Suddenly, a puff of smoke appeared. When the smoke cleared, the figure of Kurenai vanished and standing there instead was Naruko, the energetic blonde ninja. She scratched the back of her head sheepishly. "Well, I didn't think that trick would actually work," Naruko admitted. Kakashi blinked several times, still confused. "You mean that was you the whole time?" he asked. Naruko nodded proudly. "Yep. Pretty cool transformation, right?" Kakashi stared at her for a moment, then sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I suppose I underestimated you," he said. Naruko grinned. "Hey, happens a lot." A little while later, Kakashi woke up leaning against one of the training posts in the field. He looked around slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. Had that really been Naruko using a transformation technique? He sighed and stood up just as the bell signaling the end of the test rang. Soon Naruko, Sakura, and Sasuke walked out of the forest clearing. Sakura looked frustrated, Sasuke looked annoyed, and Naruko looked unusually cheerful. "Well," Kakashi said, adjusting his stance, "I'm disappointed to say none of you managed to get a bell." "Are you sure about that, sensei?" Naruko asked. She raised her hand and jingled 2 bells. Kakashi's eye widened. Sasuke and Sakura stared in shock. "When did she get those?" Sasuke wondered aloud. Sakura blinked. "Naruko actually got the bells?" Kakashi glanced down at his belt and noticed the bells there had vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruko must have used a clever trick with a shadow clone. Interesting, Kakashi thought. "Well," Kakashi said slowly, "it seems you did get them. Good work, Naruko." Naruko tossed one bell to Sasuke and another to Sakura. "You two take them," she said. Kakashi tilted his head. "You realize that means you fail, right?" Naruko shrugged. "That's fine. We're teammates." Sasuke looked at the bell in his hand, then tossed it back. "You earned it," he said. "I didn't." Sakura hesitated, then gently placed her bell back in Naruko's hand as well. "I didn't help much either," Sakura admitted quietly. Naruko stared at both of them for a moment. Then laughed. "You guys worry too much." Kakashi watched them carefully. Finally, he closed his book and nodded. "You all pass." The 3 students blinked in surprise. "The purpose of this test," Kakashi explained, "was teamwork. And you just proved you understand it." Naruko grinned widely. "Team 7, huh?" she said excitedly. Sakura smiled brightly, happy she could stay on the same team as her friends. Even Sasuke allowed himself a small satisfied smile. "Meet me here tomorrow at 8 in the morning, Kakashi said. "We'll begin our first mission." With a puff of smoke, he disappeared. Naruko stretched her arms happily. "This is going to be awesome," she said. And with that, the brand new Team 7 began their journey together. The afternoon sun shone gently through the window of the Hokage's office as the third Hokage, Sarutobi, sat behind his desk with a thoughtful expression. Across from him stood Kakashi, listening quietly. Sarutobi set down his pipe and folded his hands together. "You already know about the incident involving Mizuki," he said calmly. Kakashi nodded. "Events like that can change a young person," Sarutobi continued. "For a long time, Naruko used her cheerful energy and playful attitude to hide how lonely she sometimes felt. The village had not always understood her very well. At first, her silliness may have been a way to protect her heart. But after so many years, it simply became part of who she was." Kakashi's visible eyes softened in understanding. "But that moment forced her to reflect on herself," Sarutobi went on. "It helped her grow. In a way, she stepped beyond the playful mask she had worn for so long." "That makes sense," Kakashi said thoughtfully. "But there's still something I don't understand. How did she improve so quickly? Learning that many techniques normally takes months." Sarutobi smiled slightly. "You know the special property of the shadow clone technique, Kakashi?" Kakashi's eye widened with realization. "Of course. When a shadow clone disappears, the knowledge it gained returns to the original. And with Naruko's remarkable chakra reserves." "Exactly," Sarutobi said with a nod. "It allows her to learn far faster than most." Kakashi rubbed his chin. Still, some techniques seemed beyond what she could discover on her own. Sarutobi chuckled softly. "That is where things become interesting. It seems that one of our energetic kunoichi, Anko Mitarashi, has taken a friendly interest in young Naruko." Kakashi blinked. Then he sighed. Those two together could be unpredictable. "Perhaps," Sarutobi said with amusement. "But I believe their friendship will help them both. They understand what it feels like to stand apart from others. Sometimes that kind of understanding is exactly what people need." Kakashi nodded slowly. Sarutobi continued, his voice becoming more serious. "You will still guide all three members of your team. However, the council is especially concerned about Sasuke. He carries heavy thoughts, and we must help him find a better path." "I understand," Kakashi replied. "Focus on helping the team grow together," Sarutobi said. "Encourage them, guide them, and make sure they support one another." Kakashi gave a respectful nod and disappeared in a small swirl of leaves. Sarutobi looked down at the large stack of paperwork on his desk and sighed with a tired smile. "Being Hokage certainly comes with a lot of reading," he muttered. Meanwhile, deep within the training forest, laughter rang out among the trees. Anko held her sides as she laughed. Wait, tell me again. You transformed yourself and tricked your teacher into giving up the bells?" Naruko grinned and rubbed the back of her head. "Well, it worked, didn't it?" Anko wiped a tear from her eye. "That's one of the cleverest tricks I've heard all week." Naruko smiled proudly. "You're full of surprises," Anko said, patting Naruko's shoulder. "But remember, cleverness is best used for learning and helping your team." Naruko nodded eagerly. "I will. I want to become someone the whole village can rely on." Anko grinned. "That's the spirit." The two sat beneath the tall trees, talking about training ideas and fun challenges Naruko could try next. Naruko listened carefully, her bright blue eyes shining with determination. For Naruko Uzumaki, every day was a new adventure, one filled with learning, friendship, and the chance to grow a little stronger and kinder than the day before. Dear YouTube family, this is all for now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content coming your way. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey. Your support means everything. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. Love you all. Regards. 6 Path Weeb.